Ask Reddit, what is the creepiest thing you've seen in the woods, or in the mountains, or in deserts, or caves, or in small towns, or in big cities, or in hotels, or in remote rural areas, or while asleep, or home alone, or while on large bodies of water, or while on an aircraft or a nautical vessel? And I wanted to mention an interesting story here from my younger years. About probably 12 years ago, I was living in Oregon. I went hiking in a mountain called Larch Mountain, which is near Portland, fairly near there. And this is actually a mountain where David Paulides explained that there were two people hiking one time, and one of them disappeared and then was later found dead after they saw what they thought was a car headlight, which didn't make any sense for where they were. When I was hiking there, I was alone and it was winter time. There was no one else around. There was a locked gate, and I hiked behind the locked gate and up the hill. And it was about this time I heard a kind of knocking noise, and I know that Sasquatch is actually known to make a knocking on the trees. And I can't say it was far off, so I can't really say for sure what it was. It could possibly, I don't know, been a woodpecker or something as well. But it was an interesting experience hiking alone in the mountains in the winter in Oregon, which I thought was interesting. Story 1. This was almost a decade ago. I live in a town outside of Phoenix, Arizona. It was late in the afternoon as the sun was starting to set. I went out in the backyard to smoke a cigarette and play fetch with my dog. As I was throwing the ball, I noticed a small orb shoot from the ground directly into the sky. A few seconds later, another one followed, and another, and another, and another. It didn't stop for a few minutes. At first, I thought it was a Roman candle, but I just couldn't hear, but that you'd normally hear them fizzing as they fly. I couldn't hear anything. It was dead silent. To this day, I still don't know what it was. Story 2. I once worked as a housing inspector. A new client had purchased a house, and I was tasked to go and inspect it. I parked my car on the road, and as I walked up the path, nothing extraordinary jumped out at me. It was a run-down 3-story house. For me, it was just your run-of-the-mill wreck. I guess the buyers had walked through and seen some potential in the home, but I could see none. It was getting on to dusk, and as I didn't have the key for the front door, I made my way around to the back door of the property and went in. As I came around the back of the house, I noticed that the back door itself opened up into a large kitchen. What caught me at this point in time was as the sun began to set behind me, I could feel a drastic change of air temperature. It was late summer, and I assumed that this was the reason for the drop in the temperature. I turned to look at the sunset, noting that the cloud cover gave the sky a nice crimson hue. I turned back towards the door, and that's when I saw it. On the other side of the kitchen was a door that led into a hallway, which in turn led to the front door. The front door had colored glass, but what was standing in the darkness of the hallway to this day still makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. There was a silhouette of a man. Judging from the build, I could tell it was a man. There was no distinguishable features to see, just a black silhouette. What happened next froze me to the spot. Where his face was, 2 eyes open, and they were the color red. Unblinking and unmoving, those eyes glowed red, and I could tell they were looking right at me. At first, I couldn't look away. Those red orbs seemed to stare straight into my soul, and I found myself transfixed, staring back. Every fiber in me told me I should run, but I could not move. I stared unblinking at the red eyes, and they in turn stared unblinking back at me. My eyes began to water, and I blinked to clear them, but as I opened my eyes again, the silhouette was gone. I freaked. I quickly ran out of the house, jumped into my car, and sped home. What would normally take me 25 minutes to drive home only took 10, as I couldn't get away fast enough. In my report, I wrote that the house had some structural issues that could not be remedied, and the house was eventually torn down. In its place is a new housing unit with 6 3-bedroom homes. I have heard stories from tradesmen who have been on site at night and have all said they felt like a cold chill every time they go there. I did not look up the history of the property, but nothing unusual jumped out at me. Up to that point in my life, I never believed in the supernatural or the paranormal. Even now, I am skeptical of those things, but I know that what I saw was pure evil, and I have never had an encounter like it since. Story 3. Another time riding horses through a lower valley of the mountains, this airplane appeared and started flying really low back and forth. We were like, what the heck? And suddenly a large square something was dropped from the plane. We didn't even need to communicate with each other, we just hightailed it home. Story 4. I was hiking with my mom and we heard a car coming on a nearby road. It's a small sport convertible. It zooms around this curve, and as it does, the driver throws a manila file with tons of papers out of the car. The papers go flying everywhere. Car is gone. The papers are doctor's notes, charts, reports, history about one person. They were all very disturbing, trying to diagnose this patient. There were handwritten notes on outbursts this patient had, medicine he was on, his family history. There were tons of these papers scattered everywhere, some handwritten, some typed. Others looked like graphs and charts. So we spent a few hours looking at these notes. I'm sure my stepmom could go into more detail on the papers. I was still too young to realize how strange the whole thing was. We also found a really cheap brown wig further up the trail and a suitcase with even more documents, all on just this one person. We ended up leaving everything there and calling the non-emergency number and explaining the whole thing. I don't know if anything came of it. I don't know if there was any mental hospital close by. I do remember it was a Sunday about 3 p.m. Story 5. My mom doesn't like driving on the highway, so when I was a teenager, we'd take the back way when visiting my grandparents. There was one town we'd always pass through that gave us the creeps. It was very small, no grocery store, no gas station, just some houses, a church, and a community center that was weirdly nowhere near the rest of the town. A lot of main roads went near it, but not through it, and it was the kind of place that most people didn't pass through. We never saw anyone on the street. Occasionally you'd see a shadowy figure peeking out from the porch, but that was it. There was a huge park with a nice-looking playground that we never saw a single child at. If vampires were real, this was definitely where they'd live. Once my mom and I decided to drive down a side street in this town just to see what was there. We came across a car repair shop, which was weird because we never saw any cars there, and as soon as we approached, this guy came out. His face was not the shape of a normal human face, it was kind of lumpy. Obviously, some people have facial deformities, nothing scary about that, but there was something so unsettling about this guy. He stormed out and just stopped and stared at us with the angriest look I've ever seen. It didn't help us that this was the only human we'd ever seen outside in a town we'd driven through dozens of times. We quickly noped out of there and never explored the side street again. Story 6. My mother and I were coming home from a Wednesday church Bible study. This was a weekly thing. We lived in a rural community and we took the same route every time. This one Wednesday halfway home, I see 6 to 7 small lights hovering in the distance over a tree line behind a farm. I got my mother's attention and I begged her to stop the car at the farm driveway. The farm was within viewing distance. We got out of the car and watched the light balls move up and down and right and left. I soon realized they were a lot farther away, so I started to walk towards them. My mother screamed at me to get in the car. I had never seen her that terrified, so I got back in the car and we drove off. Never saw anything like that again, even though we never stopped taking that route. Story 7. In the late 80s, my late friend Ariel went camping in the desert to the Mapimi Silent Zone, which is famous for being a place where a lot of UFO sightings happen. One night he was sleeping in the sand under the stars and suddenly he woke up. He saw on the horizon some strange lights. He took out his binoculars to see what was happening and then he felt a sudden feeling of danger. A voice came into his head that said, "You don't belong here, get out." He gathered his stuff and ran away. He used to love to camp in the desert, but he never went back. Until his death, he told his friends lots of interesting and fun stories about his travels, but that incident made him feel scared in spite of all the years that had passed. Hunting a mile off the road, I got a really creepy feeling. Someone was watching me, and more than just one set of eyes was on me. I blew it off because why? I'm a middle-aged male of good size. You would think twice before messing with me. Not sure if it's all the fat or the fat guy's muscle. So I keep scouting. I see a lady's sock. Kind of weird, but it's old and stuff blows around. About 50 yards further, I see a shoe. Now this gets me thinking, what the heck? Put these together and someone was having a bad day. I'm still being watched, but I can't place it. The birds are far away now, and there isn't much noise in this part of the woods. I'm getting nervous and feel the trees start closing in on me. I chided myself about letting the imagination run. I'm no coward, so I pressed on. The sock and shoe are older, probably been there a while. Walk on and see something else. A pair of women's jeans. Now I start to freak. I'm too far for anyone to hear me cry for help. And so was she, and someone is still watching me. I can feel it. So I try my best to look further into the woods and then try to turn and catch a glimpse of my watcher. My sixth sense is going crazy right now, shouting at me to leave. No glimpse of the watcher, but deeper in the woods I spot the shape of a person, low-like crouching in the woods. I'm no coward, convince myself to walk over and say hi, that'll really confuse them. I take a few steps and realize that isn't a person but a lady's top on some brush. And I'm done now, not wanting to find this body, this is just creepy. Woods are dead silent now. I turn to leave, and about 50 yards away, two deer bolt out of the woods and crash away from me. At this point, I don't care about hunting anymore. I ran out of the woods, walked back to the car, left, and had never been back. That place is in my nightmares sometimes. Story 9. I go on month-long canoe trips in northern Ontario every summer. In 2021, we were canoeing across the James Bay in order to get to the town of Musoni, where we would take the train back down to the province. There were no logging roads, no bridges, and only the occasional off-grid hunting cabin. It was around 9 o'clock at night, and we were about 20 km from the mouth of the bay. Everyone was asleep to catch the tide in the morning, so I was the only one watching the water move. The moon was very bright and there was no cloud cover. I heard a whistling noise and looked up to see a shiny cylindrical object flying overhead. It dipped quickly and plunged into the river. It wasn't very big and looked about the size of a paper towel roll. It shot back out of the water a few seconds later and instantly accelerated to the speed of sound. It made a sonic boom and I could see it reflecting the moon before it went out of sight. It kind of made me cry because I felt so special. I have no idea what it was, but I was the only one who saw it. I was in the right place at the right time. Everyone else who woke up from the boom thought there was a hunter nearby. I never told anyone about this. Thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe.